Lynn. We're all greeting Lynn. It's the only person I can see in these lights. So Soren was very clear that it was important to speak from the heart, but he gave me this daunting assignment, which was to be here today. And I'm grateful, but it sent me down a rabbit hole. And I'm a researcher by nature, and I learned so much. And in fact, I've written a very long manifesto, which I just want to give you pieces of because, it's quite nuanced. It's going to be published. So anyway, if you're interested, you can have the whole catastrophe. Thank you, John. After this afternoon. So I want to begin first thanking my good friend, cognitive researcher Abiba Birhane. She really turned me on to the issues around data sets, racism, and sexism. She's just an incredible person. And she gave that presentation at UPIA's Varela International Symposium and just rocked it completely. And I want to thank Randy Fernando and Kozan Palevsky, who read my manifesto, so to speak, and made some very important suggestions. And also, I have to thank Thich Nhat Hanh and Roshi Bernie Glassman. These two phenomenal Buddhist teachers, now gone from this earth, but their dharma persists. They never turned away from structural violence. And this is a very deep issue in the world of AI. And thank you, Soren, whom I've known since, now many decades, for being such an incredibly close friend all these years. Now, the first computer printout I ever saw was in 1965 I'm 81, so that kind of puts it in context. But anyway, I was at Columbia University, and the IBM mainframe was there, and I was working at the Bureau of Applied Social Research, doing cross-cultural research, a very powerful project about cultural diversity. And it took a long time to get anything going in that world, to program. But, today, we're in a completely different situation. I mean, in a mind moment, you get information, disinformation, and also what is called infoshum, which is a Russian term referring to how to induce us as consumers to click and how to basically deliver disinformation and to confuse and undermine our belief in anything that is so-called real. And we're in this huge development process around AI, and we know at this point, although there are tremendous benefits, for example, in the area of medicine, around climate, around giving the speechless the capacity to speak, we also know that the greatest benefits are actually going to the individual, the corporation, the country, or the ego who's dominating this race that we're in. And there's another race that's going on. And I recently read in the Harvard International Review this headline, "A Race to Extinction, How the Great Power Competition is Making Artificial Intelligence Existentially Dangerous." So we're in a bunch of different races right now. And I read also in the Washington Post from a critic who said, how can we fill up the depleted reserves of trust and of reason in our world as we see the impact of the digital world on our individual and collective psyche? And I think that is what, in part, we are addressing here. So it's very clear, I believe, to every person in this room that we have a moral responsibility to understand and to inform ourselves to the greatest extent possible about what AI is, not only in our lives as individuals, but for this living earth. I know personally, but I'm sure all of us know that the persuasive technologies that we expose ourselves to are quickly degrading our sovereignty, our agency, our very identities, in fact, are being commodified. And also, this term that Yuval Harari has used, the useless class, is, if you will, breeding or fostering a class of individuals who are being pushed to the margin of this world. And there's craziness out there from my point of view, like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't name names, but I have to, calling this out. You know, I read Mark Anderson's manifesto, and I was just, I found myself completely dismayed. You know, the utopia that he is suggesting that will arise, where everything that we would consider having to do with the well-being of this earth and of each other is being challenged there, where he, you know, the panacea for everything now is AI, from child care to warfare. And of course, at the other end of the continuum, it's the anti-panacea, and that is the end of the human race is being predicted. So I don't need to articulate the harms and the benefits. You know those, and I've got them, you know, in this piece. But I just want to say that we are in a landscape that is primed, in part, by humanly flawed data. Humanly flawed data. It's also compounded by extractive economic interests, and it's furthered, and forgive me for saying this, by adolescent drive. And not much thought to the environmental, the psychic, the social impacts of the harms that are current and that we will probably see exponentially increasing if we don't step up and provide a means for literally shifting the stream of AI's development. Now, in the mid-1980s, I was watching television. You probably remember, some of you remember television. Anyway, I was watching TV, and one of the top generals in our country was giving this really amazing talk about the fact that there had been no clear plan made in relation to the disposition of nuclear waste. And what we're seeing, interestingly enough, is there still is no clear plan. And the future is really very compromised in relation to this. But my sense is that in relation to AI, we're not in an entirely dissimilar situation. In fact, it might even be more problematic, because what has happened in many quarters is that trust has been fractured, and that it's contaminating our society, and it's contaminating our psyche. And there is no clear plan forward in relation to building trust in communities, in our experiences, individuals, and in nations. And that is why, from my point of view, such a conversation that we're having today is so important, because a plan has got to be made. So we can ask, what does Buddhism have to do with this? You know, I've been in this Buddhist world since the mid-60s, since the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. It has influenced my life deeply. I was a social scientist and became a practitioner. and partly because Buddhism made a lot of sense to me conceptually. For example, there's some interesting convergences between Buddhism and AI, and that is the slipperiness of reality. I mean, this is one thing that is very curious about these two worlds, that the phenomenal world has this quality of immateriality or of transitoriness, of slipperiness. And so also is the case with AI. And we can ask ourselves, really, what is real? What can we believe in? And even in the Diamond Sutra, the Vajracchedika, it says, oh, you should see this world, a drop of dew, a phantom and a dream, lightning in a summer cloud, a bubble in a stream. Well, I appreciate the Vajracchedika, but some of us need to feel in a certain way that there has to be some kind of a reality that has a sense of firmness to it, that we're not all entirely caught in a dream. And in spite of the slipperiness by these shared worlds of Buddhism and AI, one thing is clear. We have to be aware that harm and suffering is present in relation to how artificial intelligence is being deployed to a certain extent today. And this is only the beginning. And I feel kind of weird coming up here after Van because he was so much fun. So I'm like, forgive me for being the bearer of bad news, but that was my job today. Tristan and I, we were cut out for this. And, I asked myself, what about Buddhism? What has this got to do with Buddhism? How can, if at all, Buddhism help? I mean, will meditation help? Will Buddhist philosophy and psychology be of service at all? Or will this just be a landscape where we end up doing charnel ground practice? Charnel ground is that situation where dead bodies are put on the earth to putrefy. And my beloved teacher, the late Glassman Roshi, spoke so often about the power of charnel ground practice. But those who practice it, much in the spirit that Van spoke about earlier, have to have the resources and resilience to transform, if you will, the coal into diamonds or the mud into a lotus. It's dangerous and hard work to actually practice in the midst of a landscape of extreme suffering. And then there's a group of Buddhists in relation to this who have made an interesting proposal that the ethos that is characterized by the vision and the archetype of the Bodhisattva and the vows of the Bodhisattva, which is to awaken and to end suffering, that ethos be in some way instantiated into the AI platforms. And that group also proposed that we reframe the notion of intelligence, per artificial intelligence, as care. And I have to ask myself, can there be actually something that we could call artificial wisdom? Can there be something that we could call artificial compassion? Maybe yes, if inculcated into the system was a kind of ethic of virtue, but also I'm highly doubtful. I'm doubtful. And I think that reframing the notion of intelligence as care is, in a way, a little bit late. But there's another Buddhist notion, and I don't want to put aside, by the way, the archetype of the Bodhisattva and all of that which is implied. But this is a notion I think is really important, and it's in the term Appamada. And last night at our small dinner party, I brought this term into focus. I just said, it is so important that we actualize Appamada, which is translated commonly as heedfulness, or as conscientiousness, or vigilance. And I like how Stephen Batchelor characterizes it. He characterizes it as care. Can we instantiate Appamada, that kind of vigilance, that kind of care, into the systems that we know as AI? And it also means, do we have, and why meditation, mindfulness practice is so important, the wherewithal to actually recognize when we are off course and we shift back to the vows that we've taken to not harm directly or through technology indirectly. So how? One has to ask. I think that the Center for Humane Technologies is doing such important work in this regard. I have to thank Tristan, Asa, Randy, and their team. We have to be informed. And I thank Soren for giving me this blasted assignment because, I was just kind of going merrily along. I had GPT, and I'd looked up, I said, well, write some haiku, and they did such a terrible job. Then I upgraded to 4, thanks to Randy, who took me, mentored me through how to do that. They didn't do any better on the haiku. Then I put this talk into ChatGPT-4, and it completely wiped out all nuance. So I, lost interest in the platform pretty quickly. But anyway, I think it's fine for many people, but not for myself. Anyway, I'm willing to give everything a try twice. But my time is something I value. But I'm also thinking a lot about the work of Francisco Varela, my good friend, the philosopher, neuroscientist, and Buddhist, who articulated, along with Evan Thompson, what is called the inactive view in relation to artificial intelligence. And from this perspective, AI is already embedded in the context of our lived experience. It is coexistent with all aspects of our lives, whether we're accessing technology or not, and whether we know it or not. And it's not so much a matter of accessing it, it has accessed us. It is now part of our psychosocial biome. Whether we know it or not, whether we want it or not, whether we like it or not, we are being colonized by it, just as we have colonized it. And we can put it nicely from a Buddhist perspective in Thich Nhat Hanh's words, which is characterizing a view of codependent arising. We inter-are with artificial intelligence. So what might Buddhism offer in this tsunami of AI development? I think what we have to offer is subtle, but very important. My good friend Norman Fisher has talked about the Bodhisattva attitude. And this is an unshakable attitude of clarity that reflects our very character. This is our stance our point of view. He writes, it is the very atmosphere that colors our way of seeing the world, our way of seeing reality. It is an attitude that is saturated by Appamada, by conscientiousness and care. And yet we have to ask, are most of the developers of this phenomenal process known as AI, do they care? I mean, the fiscal and psychic joyride is probably what really matters in the experience of many of the developers and investors. And I feel that we as global citizens have got to actually step in at this point and to engender a major phase shift in how AI will proceed to unfold. So I want to, looking at the reality of time, I'm going to just cut to the chase of, you can read it in Tricycle later, and I'm going to blog it on Upaya's website later today. I want to talk about, briefly, takeaways. In the end, whether AI is life-affirming or life-denying truly depends on all of us. To paraphrase Ty, all of us, whether we're a developer or whether we're a consumer, we need to engage in the soft technologies of self-correcting practice and healthy, transparent communities as the sane instruments with which we experiment with truth. Both sides of this equation have to actualize Appamada. If we're in an institution that's developing AI, we can bring wise friction, to quote Randy Fernando, to these institutions to decenter and decolonize AI's embeddedness in the Eurocentric, capitalistic worldview. We can also advocate, with indigenous consent, for diverse knowledge systems to be a fundamental part of the AI landscape. And I thank Sabelo Lambi for taking this view so strongly. We can legally call for the decommodification of our very identities. We can further commit to disrupting systems that foster structural violence in AI systems. And we can make good trouble. And we should. And we shouldn't wait. Ultimately, we have to ask ourselves that can we now foster an AI landscape that is not only seemingly rational, but genuinely relational and rehumanized, where dignity, human rights, and the rights of nature are valued. Again, thanks to Sabelo. And at this time, we have to be unflinchingly honest as we embark on this profound journey of developing new intelligences. Instead of leaving the fractured trust waste for later, please, like Van was saying, I have 2 therapists. Let's deal with it now. You know, Facebook acted like big tobacco in its formative years, knowingly sowing social distrust and psychological trauma in young people, while denying it all the while. We cannot allow our friends or ourselves to act in bad faith at this time. We should make sure that these big-brained mammals who are driving the development of AI form a CERN-like relationship of cooperation and ethics to ensure that AI is a positive contributor to a sane and possible future. And most importantly, all of us must endeavor to live by the values and the vows that relate to ending harm through technology. Thank you. Thank you.